probably have often pondered over the identity of God. Who is he? What does he look like? Perhaps it's an uncle on a cloud, but you certainly never would have thought it possible. God is you. And no, not in an ironic sense, but in the truest sense. An all-powerful being, capable to change reality, to travel to parallel worlds. He can shape his own version of reality effortlessly. Is you? And I realize that this probably sounds very strange, maybe even crazy. And if you haven't turned this video off yet, I've had some success. Perhaps it will turn your perspective on many things, just as it once turned mine. And when I was asked what the 5 most life-changing events in my life, I said this. Knowledge. Knowledge that I'm going to impart to you today in this video. These statements are usually in peculiar brochures distributed by equally peculiar people in public thoroughfares. I hope I look more appropriate than that, but what would you say if this information didn't come from someone you know? Or from a dubious religious organization, but from, say, the Central Intelligence Agency. Central Intelligence Agency of the United States? And it would be contained in a secret report created for internal use by the US intelligence community.
There is indeed a report present that meets these criteria.
And the information contained in it is a blurring of the lines. Absolutely everything that official science has to say about the human brain. On the brain, the structure of our consciousness, and what God is. Summing up, the key points of this document are as follows. The material world does not exist. What we consider reality is merely a construct of our consciousness. And what's more, our consciousness is a divine entity, and we are
gods.
Extraordinary claims necessitate compelling evidence. Hence, let's meticulously analyze and scrutinize the report for a more comprehensive understanding and dissect its contents. And right now, it appears that you have the opportunity to touch onto a classified CIA report. And you will probably have a question, where did I get the secret CIA report? And the answer to that is very simple, because according to the laws of the United States, after 25 years, the documents are declassified and they are published on the official website of the American intelligence. If you want to access the original report, you can visit the CIA website just like we did before and make sure that everything we're saying here, the phrase is definitely present in the document. And the other question you probably want to ask is, why would US intelligence be concerned with questions of the divine? Intelligence agencies worldwide seek techniques. There's a logical answer for it. Discoveries that might give them an edge in the great intelligence game. I'm telling you this as someone who's been for 6 years and 2 years scientifically. Through scientific research, studying the brain and how to influence it. And after
2 years
of scientific and social experimentation, having found a tool to influence the psyche, one that's not registered, although I'm not a scientist, one that's unknown to the world.
Well, we did a patent search with scientists, with advanced specialists
of our country, and we haven't found anything. That works exactly the same way, and it's called brain programming. And then, as I continued to research this topic, I came across that both the CIA and the Russian intelligence services and even the Institute and NRB, the Hitler Institute, were researching ways. The aim is to shape the human brain and control the mind's influence. And so when I came across this report, it was like I realized everything again. Intelligence agencies around the world are constantly looking for techniques of discovery that could give them an edge in the great intelligence game. There is such a search in the field of esotericism, among others. Agree, in general, if you are the head of a country, you would like to have an intelligence officer who possesses telepathy, receiving secret information directly from the heads of generals and ministers. I have an interview on the channel with General Seven, a general who headed an entire military unit in Russia conducted scientific research into the paranormal, esoteric, and superpowers of the brain for military intelligence purposes. They rationalized this endeavor and implemented the findings into military intelligence. And they started doing it when they realized that the CIA had been doing it for 40 years. Successfully overtook them, but it was that the CIA found the Monroe Institute, a mysterious, an enigmatic institution specializing in altered states of consciousness. This is where the getaway system is being developed, a set of techniques by which consciousness can access new layers of reality. The institute is being directed by Lieutenant Colonel Wayne MacDonald. In '83, he provides the very report we are reading today. What did the intelligence find out? The CIA finds Project Getaway, a set of techniques to allow the mind to leave the body. The report calls it the gateway experience. It's all about tuning the signals of the hemispheres of the brain. Let's remember how our brain works. We have two hemispheres. The right hemisphere is responsible for creativity and fantasy, the left for logic and abstract thinking. Normally, information is transferred from one hemisphere to the other, and Getaway, with the help of special sound waves and meditations, tunes the brain so that the hemispheres process information simultaneously. At that point, consciousness is separated from the brain and can travel to parallel worlds. Does that sound magical? But for now, let's go further. Once outside of the physical body, consciousness gains the astounding power to freely manipulate reality as it desires. Many millennia before the Monroe Institute, Indian yogis made the same discovery. In the Vedas, the state of leaving the body is called the opening of the chakra, the kundalini. But if the experts of Vedic practices take tens of years to reach enlightenment, the modern technique allows to achieve the same effect in a few days. What happens to the consciousness after brainwave tuning? Lieutenant Colonel MacDonald himself describes it this way. Imagine an ordinary street lamp. Its light spreads out in all directions at once. It's bright around the lantern, but the farther we get away from it, it gets darker. The diffused light from the streetlight illuminates an extra large area. That's how our consciousness normally works. Now imagine a laser beam, or take a laser pointer in your hand, and you can see that the concentrated directed light can penetrate much farther.
A powerful laser can send its beam many kilometers. That's the beam that the CIA believes our consciousnesses are capable of sending out.
A powerful directed stream that can overcome not only distance, but time as well. We'll come back to the beam later. In the meantime, I'll answer a question that I'm sure has arisen in many of you. In school, we were taught that the brain is consciousness, thinking, and the electrical impulses traveling between neurons in the brain. And if that's true, it would seem impossible to separate consciousness from the brain. So what's the answer? Imagine you are driving a car on a mountain road and you see that there is a precipice ahead.
But the guidebook you are currently utilizing
Shows a perfectly flat road. And I think most of you will decide that the guidebook is wrong and will not give up the gas and send the car into the precipice. What's my point? Well, the point is, if conventional wisdom contradicts the obvious, there's something wrong with wisdom. The airlock effect is real. It's been proven by a lot of experiments. If it is impossible in our picture of the world, it says only one thing: our picture of the world is wrong. And if you think it's incorrect, don't ignore it. Continue observing this video, as you may discover numerous captivating explanations for yourself. As it turns out, in the gateway effect from the point of view of modern physics, there is nothing at all contrary to the fundamental laws of the universe. To understand this, we need to answer a question that, at first glance, seems impertinent. Namely, what is the real world and a real object? A material object. Now, you're entitled to be outraged because everyone seems to realize that objects are things that you can touch. A table, a chair, a windowsill, and many of you are holding a phone right now, and the phone is material. We can see it, we can feel it. We can feel its weight, and we can control what happens on the screen with our fingers. But in terms of physics, it's not quite that simple. Let's go back to 6th grade for a moment.
Remember when we were taught about atoms?
Do you remember the model of an atom that the teacher showed us? A plastic ball, a nucleus, with other balls of electrons on spokes around it. And to most students, the atom looks like solid balls. And it seems like if I shrink down to the size of an atom, I can pick up these balls and play mill bowling. But I don't. In the 20th century, physicist Niels Bohr proved that is not true. That the nuclei and electrons
Of atoms.
everything in the universe, including us, is composed of energy rather than physical matter. If we were able to shrink ourselves down to the size of a particle, we would observe clusters of energy instead of tangible spheres. These glowing bundles of energy would number in the billions. And now let's apply logic. If we acknowledge that every component of our ring is composed of gold, then it follows that the ring itself is made of gold, correct? To extend this reasoning, if all matter comprises energy, then it can be said that everything we observe in our surroundings is ultimately comprised of energy. The houses, the mountains, the forests on them, the roads we walk on, the people, are all lumps of energy. And the whole human being, the brain, consciousness. The human body is an incredibly intricate network of energy fields, with the brain transmitting electromagnetic energy through its neurons to facilitate thinking. That means that our thoughts are electromagnetic energy. Again, this is not my imagination. I'm telling you the research of scientists. And our brain works on radio frequencies. The energy of our thoughts is measured in hertz. It turns out that the theory in which the brain is a material body and consciousness is energy, and the brain produces this energy like a battery, is wrong. Energy is both the brain and consciousness. And if that's the case, why do we believe that it's the brain that produces our thoughts, our consciousness, and not the other way around? It is the primacy of consciousness that psychologist Keith Floyd has argued for. The brain is made by consciousness, and it sounds paradoxical. But the brain serves as a tool for engaging with the surrounding world, akin to virtual reality glasses such as Apple Vision. By wearing them, you are able to immerse yourself in an alternate reality and actively participate within that realm. And if that's the case, then you can do without this device. Because when we take off the virtual reality glasses, our identity doesn't disappear. And to understand exactly what Getaway does, let's remember another example of virtual reality that everyone is familiar with. I'm referring to our dreams, in a dream. These people can visit the Rio Carnival, go down to the Casa Oriente in Pasino, or meet with anyone. And how can we manipulate our consciousness in our dreams to turn dreams into conscious dreams, in terms of this report by the CIA?
And the Monroe Institute?
Monroe Institute, we can also control our reality. And if what we think of as reality is essentially, if being a dream, does that imply that consciousness can exert control over it at its own volition?
The CIA report says...
Yes, it can. The document emphasizes, a human being is not a physical being. You are not limited by the confines of your brain. You are infinite, like the energy of which you are composed. And there's nothing in that statement that contradicts the laws of physics. British physicist David Bohm proves. Our universe is a huge hologram. But let's be clear. For us, a hologram is something that is broadcast to the outside world. Some kind of projector showing us three-dimensional pictures. But here it's the other way around.
We're broadcasting a hologram inside our brain.
Let me get this straight. I mean, everything we see, hear, taste, touch is happening inside of us. We construct reality for ourselves. But usually this construction happens according to a predetermined program, a program sitting in your head. It's like an open-world computer game that we didn't write, and where we're free to go wherever we want, but we're still subject to the rules of the computer code. And the CIA says the code can be cracked and rewritten to suit itself. How do we do that? You remember that atoms are energy. One of the properties of energy is to create waves around itself. Ooh.
Waves can have different lengths.
Like radio waves. I'm sure many of you remember the frequency of your favorite radio station. It's FM. That's the wavelength. At the end of the 19th century, the brilliant physicist Max Planck created the concept of the Planck distance. Planck distance, it's the wavelength at which quantum gravity begins to work. And space and time disappear. This is the length at which black hole radiation operates. Meditation and other techniques bring the length of brainwaves to the Planck distance. This is where a continuous stream of consciousness is formed. The same laser beam. Energy of the highest concentration. And here the document introduces one more concept, without which it is impossible to realize its essence: the absolute. A global intelligence pervading the entire universe. Now perhaps a little more concentration or really free time. That's what I've been urging you to do. But without that, you're really going to find all of this information very complicated, incomprehensible. Take some free time for yourself. Better to pause it now and come back to it. And in the meantime, send it to someone who has the time to watch it. So, the absolute.
The global mind.
Pervading the entire universe. The absolute is an incredibly complex concept, but and it's our job right now to get to the bottom of it. And I will try to explain its essence as simply as possible. We have just talked about the fact that energy generates waves. Including waves, the part of energy that is mind also generates waves. And in the middle of the 20th century, French physicist Louis de Broglie coined the term corpuscular wave dualism. Wave dualism. А теперь вы можете спросить, Yana, what are these physics terms? That's enough. I'm going to ask you to relax and don't memorize anything. None of the terms, none of the names. All you have to do is follow the chain of logic to arrive at the conclusion I'm leading you to. All of this has already been done for us. Studied by the smart guys, proven by the smart guys, the smartest minds on the planet. I've figured it out and I'm here to tell you, and your job is simply to follow the chain of logic. So, he coined the term corpuscular wave dualism. What does that mean? What you're about to see on your screen. A little excerpt from the most popular and the most basic experiment that showcases the fundamental principles governing our world and our reality. Let's familiarize ourselves with quantum mechanics, and more specifically with the two-slit experiment. We must first look at how particles behave. If we bombard the shield with a slit with small solid balls, we will see a single streak on the shield they hit. If we add another slit and fire at the shield, we will legitimately see two stripes on the screen. Now let's see how the waves behave in this case. The waves pass through the slit and spread out, hitting the screen with the greatest force strictly along the line of the slit. The bright stripe on the screen is similar to the stripe in the first solid ball experiment, but when we add the second slit, something different happens. If the top of one wave meets the top of another, they cancel each other out, and we will see an interference pattern of many stripes on the screen. Thus, if we pass solid balls through two slits, we see two fringes. But with waves, we see an interference pattern of many fringes. So far, so clear. Now let's look at quanta. A photon is a very small particle of light. If we pass photons through a single slit, we see a single stripe on the screen, just like in the case of solid balls. But if we pass photons through two slits, we expect to see two stripes. But no, in some mystical way, an interference pattern of many stripes appears on the screen. That's impossible. Physicists puzzled over this mystery for a long time. They thought maybe these small balls hit each other, because of which they repel in different directions, and therefore create an interference pattern of many stripes. Then the physicists started firing one microparticle after another so that there wasn't the slightest chance of them interacting. Soon the interference pattern reappeared on the screen, violating all the laws of physics. How can this be? How can elementary particles create a pattern like waves? After all, they were released one at a time. No one understood this. Logically, it turned out that the particle, as if split in two, passed through both slits and hit itself. The physicists were completely baffled by this. They decided to see which slit the particle actually went through. They put a measuring device near one of the slits and released the electron. But there's more mysticism in quantum mechanics than the scientists realized. When they started observing, the particles started behaving like little balls again and produced an image of two stripes. not an interference pattern of many stripes. So the very fact of measuring or observing which slit the electron went through revealed that it went through one slit, not two. The electron chose to behave differently, as if it knew it was being observed. So, you've watched the experiment now. And there you saw that particles become waves and waves become particles depending on the mind that's observing them. So if there's an observer, if the train of thought of some person's mind is directed to this experiment, things change. And so in terms of this CIA report, the absolute is the mind of waves and particles. That makes up the entire universe. Because we remember with you that I and you and all planets, all galaxies are composed of a single energy. That is either a wave or a particle that changes depending on the mind that observes it. I mean, it sets some kind of pace. And you and I and scientists realize that the whole world functions according to some laws. And some of them we have explained, some of them we haven't yet. For some unexplained reason, everything operates like a game that was pre-programmed in advance. A computer code, built-in rules that the whole world abides by. Even the rules of the cycle of life and death. When something is born, it goes through stages of development. It reaches its peak and goes into stages of degradation and death. Then out of it, life happens again. That is, it all happens according to some laws. Now, it's believed that these laws are all governed by this universal intelligence. It's actually the energy that makes up you, me, the air around me, and everything around us. If you're thinking that this is God we're talking about, you're absolutely right. But this is not the God that is usually talked about in religion. That God is distant, incomprehensible, and inaccessible. The absolute is not just near. You are the absolute. The closest thing to understanding the nature of the absolute was the German philosopher Friedrich Hegel. Back in the 19th century, he argued what the CIA confirmed in practice. Reality is not matter, but a complexly structured mind. Hegel presents the absolute as the ultimate truth.
And here we come to the most important point.
Hegel believed that the absolute, though omnipotent, but was incapable of realizing its own created reality. Let's try to explain this more clearly. The absolute can be likened to a powerful being who is asleep. Asleep. In his sleep, his consciousness sends out waves. Do you remember that our consciousness is waves? So when we think something, depending on what thought we're thinking, it's a certain wave frequency that's measured in hertz like a radio, depending on how we feel. We also propagate waves around us. And that's how our electromagnetic field is formed. Absolutely everything has an electromagnetic field. Appliances, me, you, animals, our planet. And it turns out that if we're made up, are made up of exactly the same energy. 99.9%. A wave can become a particle if an observer just comes along and expects it to behave like a particle, and it starts to behave like a particle because of his expectation. Then I'm made up of the energy that you're made up of. I have an electromagnetic field, you have an electromagnetic field. All of this has an electromagnetic field. Depending on what we think and what we feel, we change our electromagnetic field. It turns out that everything is made up of the same energy. That's the first point. And the second point, every object has its own electromagnetic energy. Me, you, animals, planets. What's the principle? Does it work? This is the unexpected message that you have received in response to your request that you have just had. Let's say you have a desire, you say, it would be nice to go to the movies tonight. And then your friend writes to you and says, let's go to the movies. Why? Because you and your friend, talking to each other all the time, you're becoming like each other. And we remember that thought is energy, so you have the same electromagnetic energy. Or similar. And you communicate a lot and you resonate with each other. So it turns out, when you're somewhere and you think you want to go to the movies, and that thought also has a certain wave frequency. There's a being, which is a person, which is your friend, who is energetically attuned to you. And this, you remember, is not magic energy. And he reads this impulse even from a distance. How can he read it from a distance? We're on our planet. It has electromagnetic energy too. And we are plugged into it with our energy. So it's like a kind of collective intelligence, a kind of an electromagnetic environment that we're all plugged into with our energy and interacting with it. And in this way, the very instantaneous transmission of data can take place. It's not like we're going to get a text message on our phone, and it's completely from the other side of the planet. It's the same here. Even though it seems like magic, it's not magic at all. It's exactly the same thing. What happens when you're in a good mood in the morning, and then you seem to meet good people afterwards, or you're in a bad mood in the morning? And afterward, we tend to think it's usually a bad mood. Why? Because you, at that energy level, you go out into the world. And similar fields, similar people. And with similar electromagnetic energy. And if you were angry in the morning, for example, or sad, it's the job of our world is to pull up what's similar to you so that you're very comfortable. Boris, because our world loves us and takes care of us. Well, that's the way it works. Let's put it that way. That's the way it works. That like attracts like. And that is, again, classical science. So let's go back to the absolute and try to explain it more clearly. The absolute can be compared to a powerful being who sleeps. In his sleep, his consciousness sends out waves. You remember that our consciousness also sends waves. These waves, traveling through the universe, they become the things that the absolute is dreaming. Tens of thousands of worlds, billions of living beings, stars, planets, galaxies. But the sleeping being does not realize that it is sleeping. It doesn't know what's happening on the planets it's created. How the earth smells after a rainstorm, what the night sky looks like, the sound of leaves in the forest, it doesn't know. But it wants to know. So it takes a small part of its all-encompassing consciousness
and sends it out
to explore the world. This particle of consciousness is the human mind. Man was created in his image and likeness. The problem is that this mind, which is separated from the absolute, loses the realization that it's part of something bigger. It becomes a prisoner of the brain. The brain is an instrument created by the mind many millennia ago. Its function is to keep our bodies safe. So that we can focus on what's going on around us and not be distracted.
by traveling around the galaxy. Because if we were traveling like that, we'd be defenseless.
And could be preyed upon by predators. The brain is
a dam
that prevents the mind from unfolding to its full potential. But that dam can be broken. And then what happens? The answer is simple. You will become the absolute.
But the absolute is not sleeping, but realizing itself as a person.
That is, when we realize what energy we are made of, when we realize that the whole world is made of this energy, when we realize that by changing our inner energy, by influencing it, i.e. our thoughts, feelings, and emotions, we can influence the environment, i.e. start resonating with the energy of other people, our energy will be attracted to what we need, we can realize. We can realize
That we are
a meaningful part that can actually program our lives in some way. And the only catch is how to tame the brain. Because, my favorite example, raise your hand right now.
raise it.
Raise it, because without it, there's no experiment. If you're watching this video, if you've made it to this point, your job is to surrender to me, to trust me. Raise your hand quickly.
That's it.
Now, who decided that you would raise that particular hand? You decided to raise your hand. But who decided it was this one? And who decided that it's the right height? And who decided it was this side of the palm? And who decided that you woke up in the morning, you have energy, and some morning you woke up, it is not there? And who decided that you have a mood now, and some morning you wake up, you have a mood, and some morning you don't? Somehow something inside me is changing and controlling me. Why? Like something inside of me has the power to control me, and I have no control over it? What happens when we want to do something? And at some point we get scared. And we back out? So my fear lives inside me, and it makes me act the way it dictates to me. That's inadequate. If I can't control my hand, even my hand, if I don't control my emotions,
if I don't control my fears,
how can I expect to live the life of my dreams? How can I expect to have the kind of relationship I want? How can I expect to make a lot of money? Because big money always comes with or some kind of risk or something else. And it's about controlling your emotions. It's about controlling your psyche, your brain, to be able to program your brain so that it emits that wave purity, which is the emotion and the feelings that you need and benefit from.
so that
So that you can consciously be able to realign your energy level, electromagnetic energy, and begin to synchronize with the world in the way that you need to synchronize with the world. Because if you can realign your electromagnetic energy level to the purity of your purpose and your dreams that you want, then you're going to be attracted to the kind of people that can help you shape those events, because people always bring opportunities. Without people, we can't build anything. Our task to have some specific goals is to become energetically equal to that, and our energetic electromagnetic equality will pull the right people and the right events to us. And that's an incredible mystery that I've been trying to get to for years. For years. I couldn't get it anywhere. I couldn't get it in a language that I could understand. And the way I'm explaining it to you now, it's a much more accessible language than when I came across some scientific papers and I was to get this gist out of it. And that's a huge number of different directions that I've explored. And that's the most important thing, is that I came to it not in a theoretical way, but in a practical way, when I realized that something was happening and why I started to see certain patterns. And then I realized that there are smarter people who had figured it out a long time ago. Who figured it out a long time ago, the very scientists that we're talking about today. And now, because of that, I have a tool that I use to influence the psyche. Because it's clear that we can't control our fears. We can't rewire our behavioral patterns. To rewire the behavioral patterns that we've been living in our whole life. But there is a way to tap into the subconscious mind, to get in there and rewire anything very quickly. And these are, again, techniques that are being studied by a huge number of intelligence agencies on this planet. Because, according to the CIA report, all the answers are in our brains. It is the brain that has access to this code, and it is the brain that can reprogram it. So our job is to learn how to influence our brains so that we can at least control our own hand. Not just the hand, but also to easily get the goals that we want in the shortest amount of time. Harmonious, happy relationships. A business that we love. Big money with ease. Because according to the CIA report, we don't have to work hard, long, hard hours. All we have to do to change the level of energy and get total control over it. And the tool one that I want to share with you will allow each person to approach the state of the awakened absolute, i.e. to start influencing their own scenarios. To go from one level of the life script to the other level of the life script that we want to go to. And these are not esoteric fairy tales. These are real research studies that my team has been conducting by my team over the last 2 years. And now this absolutely unique and effective method is called brain programming.
It's currently in the active stage of registration under a completely different name.
Because its efficacy, unfortunately,
is not allowed.
To bring it to the masses. So you can't come in and say, I want to register brain programming. Just like you can't write a dissertation on cancer treatment. Now, you can get to a private presentation of this method at the bottom of this link.
Unless it says in big red letters that there's no more seats.
There are no more seats available because we only ever let in a certain number of people. Because the method is closed and because we need to make sure that everyone understands how it works. The presentation is closed, the presentation is free, there will be a 3-day training, which we rarely do, and it's strictly scientific.
Tools.
To program your brain and influence your reality. If there are still seats left, you're in luck. Let's continue with the absolute technology. After what you have heard above, you will surely ask, how can it be so? After all, human consciousness is only a part of the absolute. And here we have to go back to school again, but already to the geometry class. Remember a straight line. The line is infinite, and between every 2 of its points, you can place any number of other points. That's the nature of infinity. We all learned that in school. Imagine you have an infinite number of apples. You give half of them to a friend. How many do you have left? And the correct answer is an infinite number. And your comrade will have the same amount. Any part of infinity continues to be infinity, including your consciousness. Including your consciousness, therefore. If consciousness is absolutely infinite, and our consciousness is part of the consciousness of the infinite absolute, so if you overcome the control of the brain and wake up and become fully powerful, each one of us will become God and can change the universe as we see fit. There's only one thing to do. To overcome the brain barrier, the faith. Remember, a particle becomes a wave depending on the observer. That is, depending on the thoughts of the observer. So if I don't believe in it, then I can't have 100% control over the creation of matter. So our job is to learn how to control the brain, so that once you've programmed your reality, it's not interfered with by your thoughts about mistrust and about how it's not possible. Is impossible. Yes, I realize it's scientifically explained, but I'm
A person who's lived in matter all my life, and I'm used to the idea that magic doesn't exist.
And in fact, it is magic explained by science, but how do I readjust in one day? It's a journey. And the nice thing about it is that it can be traveled quickly. We humans are like cockroaches. We adjust to everything very quickly. We get used to it very quickly. And that's the thing. That's what brain programming is all about. Now, at the point where the CIA report says that man, once he knows himself as the absolute, would be able to change the universe at will, the CIA report suddenly stops. Page 24 is followed immediately by page 26. Page 25 has simply disappeared. No trace. And by all accounts, this is where the nature of the absolute is finally deciphered. The report was declassified in 2003. And since then, everyone...
Since then?
To find page 25.
The U.S. Embassy?
Has been bombarded with requests. Petitions to declassify page 25. This petition gained tens of thousands of signatures because declassified information is always posted on the CIA website and people have access to it. The CIA responded by saying that there was never a lost page 25. They just wanted to omit page 25 when enumerating. It's a regular thing. I mean, if they hadn't and they would have had to declassify it. And if they had declassified it, then every human being would fully understand their nature. And they don't have the right to do that. Nevertheless, the missing page was found. And it was found in the very Monroe Center where this story began. In response to a request from Voice magazine, the Institute responded that it did have the 25th page, was still in its possession, and sent it to the publication. And what does the mysterious piece of paper contain? Well, it turns out that it says that the existence of the Absolute, all the world's religions say that the Absolute exists. And for example, the Christian dogma of Trinity. There is the Holy Spirit who pervades all things. There is God the Father who created the universe. And there is God the Son sent by him to earth. Doesn't that ring a bell? That the Absolute also pervades all things, created the universe and sent its mind to earth in the form of the mind of man. Plus, during their research, the CIA created a schematic representation of a hologram of the universe. Here it is. And here are the other symbols. This is the labyrinth of the ancient Hellenes. This is the spiral tree of the ancient Irish. And here's the Chinese spiral of life. It looks like this, doesn't it? This proves conclusively that the memory of the Absolute is indeed stored in every earthly culture. Also on the lost page is an aphorism widely known among esotericists.
Namely,
Know thyself. Everyone understands self-knowledge differently. Someone believes that it is enough to go to a psychologist. Others use religious practices, but the true meaning of the word, the awakening of the Absolute, the separation of consciousness from the physical body, can be considered the highest stage of self-awareness. Because when you realize your essence, you realize the universe, with its billions of worlds and life forms. So why is it that despite numerous scientific proofs, is this doctrine still so obscure?
And to answer this question, we need to remember the mysterious page 25 and its contents. What was it about it?
That caused it to be hidden for 20 years? Know thyself to free yourself. It was most likely this line that led the US government to destroy the ill-fated page. The rulers of the world do not benefit from the awakening of your mind. In order to effectively control the masses, requires one educated and frightened herd, not divine persons, who think they are divine persons and suddenly realized how to create any life scenarios. Then they can influence everything. And someone will be stronger. It's easier to take control of everything. Just imagine yourself in the shoes of a person who, let's say, controls $8 billion. Obviously, we don't know that person. Just imagine that even if you were in charge of 1 billion people, you need 1 billion people to listen to you. And because you have to somehow organize the processes so that there's no fighting, no stealing, no killing. If everyone starts to suddenly recognize themselves as absolutes, anything can grow there. Anything can grow. And it's easier to control it all. That's why the secret of our divine origin is still known to only a few, especially since it became available to the public not so long ago. But you and I are now aware of our divine essence. And while the techniques of awakening it are still available to a select few that I share them with, understanding our own nature is a huge step towards that realization. And now it's up to you and me if you've registered. Registered, if you haven't, I apologize. Let's at least help someone to learn this information. And you can send this video to your loved ones that you'd like to discuss this with. When I realized what I was telling you today, and it was important for me to discuss it with my loved ones to kind of solidify that feeling and to continue exploring this topic. Because you feel inside that you think you've found something very important, and at that moment, it's very important to create like-minded people on your own. So send it to your loved ones, give it a like, so that YouTube algorithms will recommend it to new users as well. And please write a comment. What you think about it, true, false, fiction, I'm ready for anything. Let's discuss, let's debate. I'm always happy to do that. Because Even when you and I get into a conversation, YouTube's algorithms will recommend it to new people.
And you and I will be on a mission to spread the word to the world.